Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
The stations of large cities resemble teleportation from sci-fi movies. Trains arrive and depart strictly on schedule, and passengers enter a completely different dimension through the station. Ben loved to move by rail, and each trip forced him to make unexpected inferences. The resemblance of an ordinary train station style to a harbor. The university philosophy professor discovered during his last trip. This trip was forced, so the scientist's wife, Molly, clearly did not share the enthusiastic mood of his other half. Ben, do you look like a child? You're excited about all sorts of things. What could be the charm of the train? The man always looked philosophically at his wife's discontent and tried to translate everything into a joke. Everything about him is charming. Remember the children's cartoon about the steam train? Women loudly indignant Ben. What steam train? In my opinion, you need to see a doctor immediately because you are falling into childish marasmus. Do not take diagnosis. Childhood dementia is a very rare disorder and it occurs in children. So I'm not age appropriate. The professor chuckled contentedly. While his wife Molly threw lightning bolts, Molly could not give a decent rebuff to her husband for many reasons. But the most important obstacle was lack of education. A long time ago, when everyone in the country was still equal and confidently moving toward, she came to conquer Lay. But the victory did not happen, and the girl was forced to look for at least some work on the patronage of her uncle, who managed to firmly settle in the best city on earth. She took a job at a professor's house. David, Ben's father, worked very hard, and he needed a secretary. Other girls from the provinces tried to take the place, but Molly confidently bypassed all the competitors. She managed to conquer not only the professor himself, but also his son, who was then graduating from university. When Ben's mother learned that he was courting her husband's secretary, she almost had a stroke. And I won't let my son marry a dumb provincial. Nancy had an exceptional pedigree and would not even think of unequal marriage. But the young man's father silenced her with one phrase. My dear, even the most subtle intellectual loses in many ways to an ordinary woman. And I don't want my son to repeat my mistakes. Such a huge boulder thrown by her husband into her vegetable garden rendered Nancy speechless for a while. And when she came to her senses, her husband was already dictating another scientific paper to his secretary. And to quarrel with him in public woman did not allow high status. Although Molly was born and raised in the provinces, she had a sharp mind. The girl quickly realized that the professor can under the influence of his wife to change his mind. Therefore, it is necessary to forge their happiness without wasting time. Ben was a very malleable young man, and in love, she made him submissive. And soon Molly led her soulmate under her arm down the steps of the marriage palace. All rejoiced at the union of the young. Only Nancy whispered in despair, "This marriage won't last long anyway. I will do anything to rid our house of the presence of this upstart." And indeed, the mother-in-law did everything possible and impossible to achieve this grateful goal. But she did not take into account the fact that her daughter-in-law would be very skillful in using her own means against herself. Molly did not sob into her pillow or run complaining to the old professor or her husband. She repelled all the attacks of her mother-in-law with dignity. This battle between the women lasted almost 2 years and ended with a clean victory provincial. One day during a family dinner, Molly, modestly lowering her eyes, said, "Ben and I are going to have a baby soon." It was a blow to the solar plexus, and Nancy choked on grilled chicken. The woman even had to be frightened off with mineral water to restore her ability to breathe and speak normally. That same evening, the mother-in-law chose a convenient moment and told her daughter-in-law everything she thought. Well, the bitch did a slick job. He's got us all wrapped around his finger. Nancy, you're a good teacher, not without your input. The management of the institution where Ben worked was handed over to a person far from science. The status and name of the institution changed. Along with these changes, informers and instigators became more active in the collective. One of the first to suffer from their activities was Professor. Although Molly was not officially on the staff of the institute, She was aware of all the intrigues and was the first to know about the coming trouble. "Ben, I got the information that you want to remove, someone you really pissed off." The man was optimistic. "It's all gossip. Don't believe them without me and my group. It's all gonna die down at the Institute." "Ben, do you know what the most popular expression is these days? Professors in a state of bewilderment?" Shrug. "No. Why would I want to rack my brain with unnecessary information?" "You're wrong. Today it's common to say that there are no irreplaceable people. That's nonsense. Only idiots can say that. Every person is unique, especially a scientist." But just a few days after this conversation, Ben was offered to transfer to a newly opened branch of their institute in a regional center. It was offered in a very cultural form, but the professor realized that it was an exile. But he had no choice and had to prepare for the relocation. If the head of the family took the transfer to a new place of work relatively calmly, his wife was in despair. "Ben, go to your director, have a nice talk with him. Explain that you can't get off the ground, that you have a family. I can't imagine our daughter going to a regular school and sitting at a desk with some janitor's son." Ben has always put a stop to such remarks. This time he didn't stop it either. "Your unhealthy ambition again. One would think you have royal blood in your veins. Please, please, don't say anything like that again." Molly knew it was better not to make her husband mad, and heeded his warning. But the nearer the departure came, the more the atmosphere in the house grew hot. Another outburst of discontent on the part of the woman arose when she learned that they would be traveling to their new place of residence by train. And even a month before the planned date of departure, she began to beg her husband, Ben. "All normal people fly by airplane. It's fast and convenient. Why did you decide to go by train?" The man objected to Molly. "You are right only partly, because air transportation is by no means a safe pleasure. You're wrong. I read in some magazine that according to statistics, accidents and misunderstandings happen more often on trains. I'm less trusting of various pseudo-experts. Statistics is a very conditional science, although it is based on precise figures. I won't bore you with explanations so that your pretty head doesn't hurt. But all polls and various tests cannot reflect reality because they involve a very limited contingent of people." Molly has always been skeptical of her spouse's statements. That day, when they started this conversation, she also wryly remarked, "Of course. How can we mere mortals to such a luminary of science as you? After all, we are limited people." The man objected. "Molly, you have a bad way of twisting my words. I wasn't talking about limited people. I was referring to the fact that surveys narrow the audience. And please, let's stop the unnecessary discussion. It's taking up time and nerves. I totally agree with you there, but I'm totally against the train. As soon as I imagine that I have to spend almost 2 days in a carriage." The professor didn't hug his wife for 2 days. He hugged her for 36 hours. "But you can get plenty of sleep and stare out the window as long as you want. When I was a kid with my parents, I traveled the whole country by train. I would sit at the window and watch the pictures change, like in a movie. One day, I remember my father and I got off the train." The woman waved her hand carelessly. "Ben, you told me this story 200 times. You fell behind, and then you rode a tractor to the next station and caught up with the train there. It's like an oil painting." Molly was finally angry with her spouse about her discontent. She took it out on the housekeeper. The professor heard the wife pleading with the one, "Why you Clara is always getting away with everything. If you treat other people's property so carelessly, she'll break all my dishes. I don't know why I pay your wages. I'm always having to redo your work for you." Clara had been working in the house for years. Together with the owners, she moved to a country cottage in the summer, and by winter returned to the city apartment. This impenetrable woman was not taken by the nagging, the now deceased Nancy, and the antics of the new mistress. She listened calmly to the professor's wife, but continued to do her own thing. On those occasions when there was something that needed to be clarified about the running of the household, the housekeeper went directly to Ben. When Clara learned about the professor's family's imminent departure, she also asked him, "Master, what am I going to do here without you? Or do you want to fire me?" The man looked at the housekeeper as if she were a student who hadn't prepared for a test. Clara, you're talking nonsense. You've been a part of our family for a long time, and we can't manage without you. You'll look after the house while we're away, and we've left the city apartment to the neighbors. Don't worry, we're not leaving forever. As soon as things get back to normal, we'll be back in Leh. The woman was satisfied with that detailed answer. But just in case, she asked again, "When will you come back?" The professor was embarrassed. "And to be honest, I don't know yet. There is nothing permanent in this life. You have to adjust to change." Clara, she respected the professor very much. She sensed the sadness in his voice. And she asked me nicely if I could get out of this seat. "Did someone sit you down?" And I'm right. The last thing the professor wanted was to have a heart-to-heart with the housekeeper. But in order not to offend the woman, he answered evasively, "Sometimes you have to face the fact that you've suddenly come to the right place." The housekeeper eagerly supported the master. "That's not the way to give up. You may be right, but I have no experience of fighting." The topic of conversation was exhausted. Clara, too, was busy preparing her hosts for departure. She was most anxious about Emily, for she thought the girl would not be able to fend for herself. Molly led a social life, so most of the time the professor's daughter spent with the housekeeper. Emily was characterized by a calm character and did not boast of her father's position. When she learned about the move to another city, even from behind jumped with delight. "Clara, you can't imagine how glad I am that I won't have to go to the gymnasium, where all the teachers are jerks, and the students are complete morons." Hearing such epithets of a 12-year-old girl, the housekeeper almost fainted. "My girl, where did you learn such words?" "Elite grammar school. I don't go anywhere else. I'm under house arrest." Clara was shocked all over again. "Emily, you can't say that. You have everything that other kids can't even dream of. You know, I'd give them everything in exchange for my freedom. My mom and dad and you. You all think the grammar school they put me in is a decent place. Like it's where we learn languages and etiquette. It's nothing like that. The laws there are cleaner than a juvenile detention center." Clara refused to believe what the girl said. "But I hear they have the best teachers in the school." "Aha, that's the case. Our teachers don't even care about us. Their main goal is to squeeze more money out of the parents. So I'm glad I won't be seeing a lot of unpleasant faces anymore." The teenager's revelations prompted the housekeeper to tell her parents. But Emily warned her, "Clara, you can't tell my parents anything. You and I are friends." The housekeeper couldn't resist the girl's pleading, searching gaze. "I won't tell, if you promise to behave and not express yourself." Emily threw herself around the woman's neck and kissed her. Clara was both closer to her mother and very reluctant to part with her. On the day of her departure, the girl suddenly cried. Alarmed mother began to ask her daughter about the reason for her tears, and she confessed, "I don't want to part with Clara. Mother, why can't she come with us?" The father answered that question. "My mom and I don't even know what kind of housing we've been given yet. God willing, it should be a comfortable apartment. Maybe we'll have to live in a dormitory. Dad, you're a professor. Students live in dorms." Ben just sighed. He did not explain to his daughter what social peculiarities modern society has. In short, each member of the professor's family had their own feelings about leaving. Some wanted to push the event away, while others sought to bring it closer. Despite the negative attitude, Molly clearly tolerated the trip better than her daughter and husband. Emily was bored out of her mind the whole way and couldn't wait for this torment to end. Ben imagined different options of reception at the new place. After all, he had worked at his institute for so many years and had stuck to it heart and soul. To distract himself a little from bitter thoughts, the man came up with his own theory about train stations or ports. But the phantasmagoric idea crumbled into dust. Hardly had they set foot on the platform. The crowd of people rushed to the station building, and they could hardly adjust themselves to the rhythm of this living stream. Heavy suitcases pulled their hands away, which made the plight of the newcomers even more difficult. Ben asked, "Isn't there any rapists here?" Running past, a man cheerfully said there was a good citizen. True, they can carry your things so far away that you will never see them again. Molly, clearly doomed, pronounced yes. We're in a hole, only Emily didn't say anything. She spread her backpack out on the ground and sang unhappily. But to herself, the girl thought Mom was right. This is definitely a decent place. Also a regional center. They crossed the interior, the station building, and came out the other side. Almost immediately at the entrance, there was a huge square, with people scurrying about in different directions. Ben nodded in the direction. Let's go over there and get a cab. All three of them moved toward the parking lot, but no sooner had they taken a few steps than a car braked sharply beside them. Molly obviously bounced to the side and dropped her bag. The driver got out of the cab and, in an announcer's voice, said, "Glad to welcome guests of our city. I will deliver you with a breeze and for a small fee to any point." A short-statured man of strong build took advantage of the momentary confusion of potential passengers and quickly left all the suitcases in the trunk. Only for Emily's backpack there was not enough room. But the cab driver found a solution to this little problem, threw it into the cabin. Krasnov sat down in the car, and Ben gave the driver the address. The one commented, then heading for the academic campus. "We have all the scientific elite living there. We've recently opened a new institute. To be exact, they just changed the sign on the old one." But how was it disproved? Immediately in the newspapers, there was a lure that every young man can get a demanded specialty. Yes, everything is possible nowadays. If only money were available. Molly listened to the driver's monologue and wrinkled her nose at the word waste. The left man annoyed her with idle chatter to interrupt him. She asked, "Tell me, sir, do you meet everyone like this?" "How so?" "Well, with scope and solemn speeches." The cab driver faltered. "I'm sorry if I gave you unpleasant moments, Professor," and settled down on the front seat next to the driver. And when his wife so ugly besieged the man, he looked unkindly at his half. There was an oppressive silence in the cabin. And Ben dared to remedy the situation, paying no attention to his wife. He spoke to the cab driver. "You were telling me about the new university. I've been assigned to work there. I don't know how you're settling in." The driver smiled again. "I don't like change either. When our taxi company was disbanded, I didn't know where to go. I will not deny that even desperate thoughts came to mind. If it weren't for my wife and son. I have a boyfriend, probably the same age as your girl." The professor asked with interest. "Our daughter was 12. She went to an elite grammar school. We'll have to put her in a regular school here. Don't think we're on the fringes of civilization here. You know, there's plenty here, so I'm sure it won't be a problem. You said you had trouble getting a job and how it worked out." "I started out as a private driver, but the risk was huge. Almost every day our brother was cleaned up at best and sent to the other side of the world at worst. I worked like that for 2 years, and then one very unworthy gentleman decided to take all the ownerless cab drivers under his wing. It worked out, and in fact, the same taxi park. But now we work not for the state, but for the owner. It's just like in the old days. What we fought for, we got what we got." From the back seat came Molly. "Clearly. Could you be a little more discreet? There's a child in here." The driver looked at the professor sternly. "You have a wife." The woman wanted to answer the insolent cab driver in such a way that he would remember her for a long time. But the car stopped. "Here we are, gentlemen. The stop is Academic Town. I wish you good luck and a good job," without paying attention to the woman. The cab driver held out a small plastic card to Ben. For the first time in his life, he was giving a ride to a real professor. "Just in case, take my card. You never know when you might need to go somewhere. I'll always be happy to help you." The cab turned around and quickly disappeared around the corner. Molly was clearly squirming. "What's the unpleasant type? I don't think this man has done anything bad to you." The professor took his suitcases and headed toward the main building. His wife could barely keep up with him. "Ben, think about it. If cab drivers are handing out business cards here, I can only imagine what kind of life awaits us. Honey, don't sugarcoat it. He's a normal man, sociable and very pleasant. I have a different opinion of him. But hopefully he won't meet us again and offer his services in an intrusive manner. Mom, why don't you like all people?" Emily raised her voice for the first time since arriving in an unfamiliar city. The professor smirked. The proverb about the mouth of a child, daughter. "I'd like to hear the answer to that question too." You know, sometimes I begin to think that our mother came from another planet. Emily laughed ringingly, smiled at him. Molly, are you conspiring against me? Nothing, wait, I'll give you a sweet life. But the merriment quickly disappeared. When they got into the apartment in which they were now to live, the professor's wife went from room to room. How shabby is this place? I can't believe a man with Molly's degree lived here. Don't make everyone equal. You were clearly told that the former owner of the apartment did not lead a decent life. Not in front of the child. I don't see what the big deal is. We'll do a little redecorating and get on with our lives. Ben, what's a makeover? Can't you smell the odors in here? All the walls have been eaten. Anyway, it's up to you. Emily and I will stay at the hotel for now. The professor tried to contradict Molly, but that's a waste. And I'm the only one who can't handle the repairs in people's names. Call that cab driver of yours. He promised to help you. The last phrase was said with undisguised sneer. But the professor did not fall for his wife's words because it was useless to prove anything to her. Ben remained silent. He began to calculate the upcoming expenses in his mind, and the amount he received shocked him. In spite of his degree, the salary at his previous place of work was not so high. And taking into account the fact that it was still necessary to maintain an apartment and a summer house, we had to save every dollar before leaving, even had to sell his father's old Chevrolet to a collector to cover all expenses. Ben had hoped to buy an inexpensive car here right away, but after seeing the apartment, I decided to hang on to this purchase. Ethan had met many different people in his life and had learned to recognize the characters of passengers at a glance. After meeting the professor's family, he couldn't get rid of the unpleasant feeling of some understatement for a long time. After all, with her behavior and just a few phrases, Professor's wife wanted to show her superiority. If it had not been for her husband and the girl, who had not uttered a word during the whole journey, Ethan would have dropped them off after the first turn. But the head of the family was sympathetic. Bad luck for a man to have a wife. A snake like that. And why is it that good people are more often unlucky? After a short pause, the man answered himself, because good people have thinner armor. Ethan often dialogued with himself while working. This way of warming up helped to relieve fatigue, as well as speed up the passage of time. After dropping off the memorized passengers near the academic town, he headed to the train station again, because only there could make good money. They lived modestly, so the head of the household had to get around. From early morning until late evening, Wendy scolded her husband. "Ethan, you behave, you work until the grave." The man remarked philosophically, "Thank you, dear, for the glowing prediction, though we'll all be there. Some sooner, some later. But I would like to distance this moment better later, because we will not last long without you. So be kind and die a little bit of your fervor. You can't take all the money anyway, but you should strive for it." The woman with feeling rattled the table, undressed the board. "Here's a man with 2 ears. I give him a word, and he gives me 2. Ethan, when will you listen to what I tell you? I'm not a stranger to you. I'm your own wife. That's why I'm trying to bust my belly button and you keep scolding me. I'm a man and I have to be responsible for you. That's how my father brought me up, and I hope my son has also learned this cardinal rule." It's a vivid and sometimes dramatic scene. Happened in front of the eyes of 13-year-old Peter. The guy is used to such a squabble between parents and did not pay any attention to the next clarification of relations. Small apartment of ancient layout with 2 adjoining rooms did not allow the teenager to seclude himself in his corner. So he almost daily had to be present during the heated arguments between parents because of their housing constraints. Ethan and his wife were forced to discuss burning issues in the presence of their son. But there was some good in it. Peter listened to everything and took it all in. Only at the mention of his name did he mutter something unintelligible. In the same way the boy reacted to his father's wish, "Dad, I have already learned all your rules by heart, but every day you throw up something new, so as not to waste time. You could have the bylaws printed separately. That would make it a lot easier for me." The knife Wendy used to cut cabbage for soup. Hanging in the air, "You can't talk to Daddy like that." The teenager asked defiantly, "Why are you allowed to do everything?" "Well, I'm not." You guys fight amongst yourselves every day. It's so hard to hear, and then you try to teach me manners." Peter headed for the hallway, and Ethan followed by his son. "Stop, let's talk." The teenager froze in place, but a look of disdain froze on his spring face. But standing, the man's nerves began to heat up. "You're not being scientific. Who are you talking to? Puppy?" The situation was beginning to take on a tinge of conflict, and Wendy. She decided it was her turn to put out the fire. "You men take it easy, but you, Peter, you need to slow down. You're looking at your father. Have some respect so he can respect me." Did the head of the household say it in his dictatorial voice? Respect has to be earned. Instead of keeping your mouth shut, you open your mouth. Peter abruptly turned around and flew out the door. Wendy rebuked her husband. "Ethan, how many times have I asked you to be a little nicer to the guy? You know, he's going through a rough patch. Think about when you were his age. His age. And I was out in the fields with my dad from morning till dark. I mean that verb literally. I was honored to be my father's assistant, valued his trust. At his age, it never even occurred to me to say a word against him." The man came into the kitchen and pulled a bottle of beer from the refrigerator. Wendy waved her hands at Ethan. "You're on shift tonight. I've got the night off. I'm entitled. You told me yourself half an hour ago that I'm studying myself, so I'm gonna take a break. Have a beer." The woman knew that such transitions in her husband's mood did not bode well. She nodded her head in agreement. And rightly so. Take a break. And Ethan looked suspiciously at the spouse Wendy, that somewhere on the bayonets herself, then suddenly tried on. The spouses had lived together for almost 20 years and had learned to catch each other's moods from a distance. Ethan felt even before his son's rapid departure that his wife was hiding something from him. Using the method of elimination, the man realized that the only thing she could hide was another of Peter's antics. Wendy pretended not to hear her husband's question and started chopping vegetables again. Now she had carrots and onions. Ethan drank his beer and got up from his chair. "Wendy, you're not very good at conspiracy. It's all over your face. Come on, tell me what the fuck he's done again." The woman exhaled as if her diaphragm was squeezed. "What makes you think that, Ethan?" "Simpler, everything is normal. Yesterday, his class teacher came to my department." So Wendy began to rub the edge of the towel. "You can't hide anything. You're like an X-ray. Yeah, our son did it again, but they didn't mention it anywhere. Spit it all out. What's he up to again? He sold scrap metal." The school children from different classes spent a month collecting different pieces of iron. The school had agreed with one company where all this junk was to be taken. But our Peter found another company, and he found a truck too. And with his company, he did it without the teacher's knowledge. Ethan felt short of breath, and that he had embezzled the money. Wendy was indignant. "You don't think well of your son at all." On the contrary, the proceeds for the mine exceeded the amount that was on the plan. But the teachers were indignant at the self-rule, and everything in the same spirit Peter called to the director. In short, it turned out to be a scandal. I will not recount what our son said to the school management, but the class teacher said that the man interrupted that they put up with it for the last time. In short, the 105th Chinese warning. Honestly, I don't understand what claim there is against the guy if more money was made. I don't understand it either. The man hugged his wife gently. "Darling, don't take it to heart. They're not going anywhere. Peter is one of the best students at school. He's winning all the Olympiads." Wendy no behind the nose. "Ethan, talk to him once you've cooled down. If this keeps up, we won't live to see him graduate." "All right, I'll give him some preventative work." "And who is he?" The head of the family has asked himself this question many times, but he could not find an answer. Peter from an early age was characterized by pragmatism. Even in the kindergarten, he put his group on a wide leg to exchange sweets for a favorite toy. The family budget did not allow buying expensive cars with radio control. So little Peter solved this problem on his own. He exchanged his favorite toy for candy or a pack of candy. Waffles and an equal trade was not immediately discovered. Scott's mom, with whom Peter most often made the exchange, decided to find out where his son's toys disappear from the house. and the same Scott told the parent everything. The woman was clearly dissatisfied with what was going on in the kindergarten, but spoke to the teacher politely. Cindy, it would still be understandable if my Scott traded the machine for a chocolate bar, or even an orange, but simple caramels. I really beg you to deal with this passerby lawsuit. Behind the shoulders of the educator was a huge experience, and she reasonably observed, and you, Mommy, do not give your Scott in the garden expensive toys. We have a group full of all kinds of equipment and do not have to bring here cars from home. If your Scott can't live without it, let him take something simpler. Scott's mom's eyes are rounded, but we don't have simple toys. My husband and I try to buy the best for our only son. Cindy left Mommy with a penetrating look. We have an ordinary daycare center, and not all parents can afford to buy expensive toys. Should you consider that fact? Scott's parents took note of what the teacher said. And Ethan, when she found out about their little boy's mischief, interrogated him. Where are the cars you traded with Scott? The boy stepped on his eyebrows, but showed his father his stash near the sandbox at the playground. The man retrieved from a rather deep hole. In addition to 2 cars, a trowel, cubes, and other junk. All finds he cleaned the sand and placed in a bag. The next morning, the man took the found toy goodness to the daycare center. When Scott's mom showed up, he handed her the bag of valuables. Here are all your toys. I'm sorry about what happened. The woman was embarrassed, and she brought up the candy for some reason. But Ethan cut her off halfway through. We may be poor people, but we have self-respect, and I'm not going to make a circus out of candy. And I think it's good to let kids work out their own problems sometimes. It gives them a sense of responsibility. Scott's mom gave Ethan a disapproving look, but didn't say anything. After the candy story, Peter calmed down for a while. But by the 5th grade, the boy had the urge to accumulate personal capital. To ensure a steady income, he began to write essays and test papers on various subjects for his classmates. And each type of work had its own price. In the list of services offered was also the fulfillment of homework. Peter's entrepreneurial activity surfaced. By chance, Ethan sent his son to the store, and himself was engaged in repairing the faucet in the bathroom. The doorbell rang, and the man thought that it was the son so quickly returned from the grocery store. But on the doorstep was Peter's classmate, whom the landlord politely invited to come in. He'll be back soon, and you have urgent business with him. At the age of 10, most kids can't lie. And Max, without a backward glance, blurted out, you guessed it, Uncle Ethan. Peter promised me to do math and write a history essay before lunch today. We've been getting such crap lately. Our brains are just mustaches. Still also unsuspecting. Ethan asked, it turns out that Peter does your homework for you, but his brain is also subjected to, as you say, drying up. Uncle Ethan's mouth stretched up to his ears. First of all, Peter is very smart, and it's not like he's working for us for free. Yes, it took a while for the man to realize the meaning of the words of his son's comrade. Wait, Max, I don't quite understand you. Max has already realized that he said too much and began to humor. Well, we have a sort of agreement in class. Those who do well in school help those who fall behind. Ethan fucked the guest like a tree. Why are you stuttering? Speak clearly. So the top students get paid for helping out. Right? Max lowered his eyes and hooked his nose loudly. But it's only fair if you're born dumb. You can't fix nature. That's why it's better to pay so you don't ruin your future. Uncle Ethan, that's what everybody does nowadays. It's kind of like the market. It was strange to hear a 10-year-old kid talk like that, to say the least. The man wanted to cut off his son's activities. But when Peter returned from the store with bread and milk, he didn't even raise an eyebrow in response to my father's moralizing. Dad, everyone earns what they can. Is that your judgment? Mom sells her boots in the woods, and I sacrifice my brains. If God made me smart, I should use it. That's right. Peter, but you're losing the kids. You can't do that. Dad, nobody's forcing them. They give me the money themselves. Why should I rack my brains for nothing? What's your rate? The boy didn't understand what his father was asking at first. Then he realized he was talking about rates. It depends on the complexity of the work. If it's a quarterly test, it's more expensive. The homework test costs a penny. It took Ethan a long time to recover from the shock. Peter mistook his father's confusion for approval and went on with the subject. "Dad, I'm not some kind of beast and demand money right away. In short, I have a system like in a bank." The man looked at his son as if he had seen him for the first time. "I never thought my son would become a supplier." Peter smiled. "We went over it in history. This is different. I don't give my money to anyone and I won't. I'm saving up for a bicycle." Ethan was silent Peter and inspiredly began to talk about the future. "Dad, when I grow up, I'm going to be a banker or a cool businessman. Of course, I'd rather be a banker. I'll have lots of money. I'll buy you a whole fleet of cars, and I'll buy Mom a shoe store." That day, almost 3 years ago, Ethan wondered for the first time where his son had gotten such an attitude. He and his wife feared that his son's unusual tendencies might turn into criminal endeavors. But for Peter's born craving for an interesting and prosperous life could not be eradicated. True, society had also changed a lot over the years, and many teenagers were successfully earning money in the same way as Peter. Molly went from room to room and meticulously inspected the renovated apartment. She tried to find even small faults to reduce the cost of the repair work, and the foreman waited patiently for the estimate. Thomas had encountered such clients more than once in his life. Therefore, the behavior of the professor's wife did not embarrass him at all. He even chose a convenient moment and cheerfully said, "Mistress, you are wasting your time. Believe me, we did it for ourselves. And in fact, if it hadn't been for Ethan, my guys would hardly have agreed to work at such low rates." Ben was uncomfortable watching his wife, so he hurried to get his wallet. "Thomas, it's all right. You did a great job. It was quick. My wife and I have no complaints, because we didn't even expect it to be finished by September 1. Now our daughter can quietly do her lessons in her room." Brigadier optimistically noted, "You expressed your wish to us. And for us, the customer's wish is the law." The professor started counting out the bills. But Molly sternly remarked to Ben, "Don't rush. I've spotted some loose ends in the bathroom." The foreman pleaded with the landlady, "You're just picking on the little things. This house was built half a century ago and has never been overhauled. We've done even more than we could. We've been here 24 hours a day." The man's voice sounded desperate, and Ben decided to speed up the settlement procedure, ignoring the expressive glances of his wife. He handed the money to the foreman. "Thomas, this is the full amount we agreed upon, and a little more than that. Think of it as a speed bonus. And thank you very much for your quality work." The foreman was satisfied that the matter had been resolved successfully and hurried away. Barely had the new metal door closed behind him, Molly began to reprimand her husband. "Ben, I'm amazed at your spinelessness. You're ready to please anyone, even an asshole like that foreman. It's written in capital letters on his face that he's an adventurer, and how does that quality manifest itself? The fact that people have cleaned up this apartment." The professor's voice rang frighteningly, and the woman realized that she had gone too far. But there was no stopping the man. "Molly, how many times have I told you not to talk about people like that in front of me? You're the smartest, the most well-mannered. And it's your unhealthy arrogance that brings me down the most. All right, calm down. I promise to hold back from now on." The woman smiled charmingly and snuggled up to her husband. "I'm the motherland. I'm trying. I wanted to save a little money. This renovation is costing us so much money. Darling, we would have had to pay even more if it wasn't for Ethan's help. Fate has sent us this man, and I think we should have a housewarming party and invite him and his wife. By the way, he has a son the same age as our plot." Molly's lips tightened in apparent displeasure. "I don't mind, of course, but I think your cab driver will feel uncomfortable." In the company of scientists, Ben threw an angry glance in the direction of his wife. "You're at it again. That's it. I'm not saying another word. You can invite the janitor and a couple of homeless people who are always hanging around our driveway. You're incorrigible." The professor waved his hand in despair and hurried into the hallway. He was scheduled to lecture at the institute, and he was not used to being late. Even in the first days of his arrival, they had discussed how they would celebrate the housewarming. At first, the head of the family wanted to limit himself to a family dinner, since they had no acquaintances in the city. But in the new team, the LA professor was welcomed with open arms, and many comrades did not hesitate to ask a leading question: when are you going to celebrate the housewarming? We value such events very much, because they allow us to immediately join the team. Similar traditions existed at the old place of work, and Ben had to still include the costs of the banquet. After much debate, he and his wife decided to celebrate the event right in the new apartment. But there was one problem that Molly clearly wanted to solve right away. Ben, it's all good, except for one thing: who's gonna cook for a crowd like that? You can't do it by yourself. I don't think we'll have too many guests. 15 people, tops. Wow, you want me to spend 24 hours at the stove? Oh no, I'm not ready for that kind of sacrifice. The man thought for a moment, considering his options. After a few seconds, he exclaimed with joy, "Eureka, I've got an idea. We'll order a few entrees at the restaurant." Ben, do you know how much your idea will cost us? If we'd known in advance, we could have brought Clara. I think your idea is even worse than mine. Why bother? Helping the parents was Emily, who, as usual, was silently watching them. Moms and dads, I'm amazed at your inability to solve a case like this. We should ask someone in our house to help us. I mean women. Then we wouldn't have to call Clara. Or should Mom do the cooking herself? The educated professor exclaimed, "Well done, daughter. And I even know who we can call on." Ethan bragged that his wife is a great cook. He told me that she used to work in a catering business and then moved to a department store. We got Molly on hold. So first, they help us, and then they sit down at the table with everyone else. That's what everybody does, and I don't see anything wrong with that. Although Molly didn't like that option either. She had to go along with it for lack of anything else. Wendy wasn't inspired either. When her husband informed her about the upcoming housewarming party of a new acquaintance, she grudgingly remarked, "Ethan, I don't understand your attachment to this professor, and I don't like the idea. These aren't our kind of people, and you shouldn't delude yourself that you'll be able to fit in with this Ben." The woman pronounced the professor's name with special expressiveness, but the man tried to convince his wife otherwise. You'll see for yourself that he's a normal man with no hang-ups. True, his half is his complete antithesis, but she asked for help, so I don't think we should say no to these people. Okay, I'll help you cook. It's not a problem, but we're gonna have to pick out a housewarming gift, and that's gonna cost us a fortune. Don't forget, it's September 1st, and Peter has to buy new sneakers and a tracksuit. Over the summer he waved, and on the mountain gave up. Ethan assured his wife that he had already thought of everything. "Wendy, I have a little in my stash. We'll spend it on our son, on a gift. By the professor's honor, I'll have earned it in a few shifts. We could get him a food processor or a microwave." "Ethan, are you crazy? We don't have any of those appliances in the kitchen ourselves. We can still get one for ourselves." Although Wendy Caption clearly didn't have much faith in her husband's promises, she relented. Peter, on the other hand, resisted his parents' demand to go to the housewarming party with them. "Maybe you're interested in the professor. I have my own things to do. Why are you taking over my free time?" Ethan, I had to persuade my son. "You see, I promised Ben we'd all come together. They have a daughter named Emily. She's a year younger than you. Why don't you make friends with her? And in general, I think that acquaintance with the professor may be useful to you in the future." Peter's been thinking. "Maybe, Father, you're right." "Okay, all right. But remember, I don't intend to stay there all night." Wendy, but already from the first minutes of stay in the house of Krasnoyarsk, felt out of place. The situation was complicated by Peter's prank. The guy got a kitten somewhere and wanted to give it to the owners as a housewarming gift. As soon as the owners opened the door, he dropped the live present on the floor. Ethan was delighted. "Well done, Peter. All according to tradition. Now, dear hosts, you will have your own houseboy. He'll keep the house in order and keep you out of trouble." The kitten did not wait for the owner's approval and began to explore the room unceremoniously. The furry creature delighted the professor's daughter, and she looked at the young man with admiration. How cute he was. But Molly clearly took the gift less enthusiastically. She could hardly contain herself and expressed her displeasure to the young man. "Why did you bring that stray cat here? He has fleas, and you could get an infection from him. Emily, now throw the animal." The girl did, but she obeyed her mother's command. It is not known how the incident would have ended, if not for the intervention of the professor himself. When Ben saw the kitten, he was overjoyed. "That's what we've been missing here. Come, my friend, you'll be the master." The kitten looked at the professor, then came up to him and rubbed his leg. Ben cheered, understanding everything. Nor was Wendy aware of her son's plans. She showed up as early as 5 a.m. and immediately began preparing appetizers and hot dishes. When the woman heard the indignant cries of the landlady in the hallway, she ran out of the kitchen. It wasn't hard to guess what the cause of the commotion was. And Wendy looked menacingly at her son. "You were bound to make your mark. Molly, don't worry, we'll fix it. Give me that kitten." Emily grabbed the fluffy little lump and held it close to her. "He's mine. I won't let you hurt him." The professor's wife was used to her daughter's complete obedience and was shocked by Emily's bold act. She tried to influence her daughter with gestures and glances, but the girl paid no attention to these signs. But she gave Peter a charming smile. "Thank you. This is the best present I've ever gotten. Come on, I'll show you my room. I have some new CDs. How do you feel about hip-hop?" Positive. Ignoring the adults, the teenagers and the kitten went deep into the apartment. They sat in Emily's room all evening and reluctantly came out to the table when all the guests were assembled. In Ethan's opinion, the housewarming party was top-notch. But Wendy was of a different opinion. Only the day after the party she confessed to her husband, "The whole time we were visiting, I felt out of place. I can't say anything bad about the professor. He's really a very nice man, but Molly, honestly, I'd hate to see that person again. You know, while I was cooking, she reminded me every 5 minutes what their situation was. She made me feel like a servant, and I wanted to get home as soon as possible." Ethan looked at his wife understandingly. "I felt the same way, except that besides the hostess herself, some of the guests were looking at us disapprovingly. So I agree with you that we should not attend such events. Of course, we can keep in touch with this family, but in such a way that the relationship does not oblige us to anything." Suddenly, Peter's voice came up. "My dear parents, would you decide on your preferences? First, you forcefully dragged me to the guests, and now you are scolding yourself for what is unclear. Personally, I liked everything, and the girl they have is great. Too bad she won't be going to our school. Natural surprises have already surprised few people." Therefore, the inhabitants of the regional center perceived the summer heat in the middle of May as an ordinary phenomenon, not a climatic anomaly. By 10 a.m., the sun shone to the limit, and passers-by tried to take shelter in the shade. Peter and Emily were also looking for a cool place to sit, but all the benches in the park were occupied. And the young man suggested, "Look, go, you see, there's a small lawn almost at the fence. Let's go there. Our ice cream will soon turn into 2 little white puddles." The girl, laughing, agreed. "Although it's not usual, but we have no choice. I can already imagine in advance how everyone will turn on us and silently judge us. Let them look. It's not like we're going to do something obscene in front of everyone." Emily pushed the guy as hard as she could. "What are you implying?" Peter could barely stay on his feet. "I wasn't thinking of anything out of bounds. You're the one who's always coming up with vulgarities." Also, the decent girl, Emily swung again with her purse. But the young man dodged the blow. He easily jumped over the shrubbery, which is a solid line, and stretched along the park path. Emily wanted to follow his example, but remembered that she was wearing a short dress. "Peter, that's not fair. We're not on equal terms, so I won't accept your victory." The young man had already settled down on the lawn and waved to his girlfriend. "I'm only willing to concede to you while we discuss such trivialities. The ice cream will definitely float." Emily, "Oh, it's floating." A white trickle ran down the dainty girlish arm. Emily escaped the living obstacle and settled down on the lawn beside the young man. "Paying not in service, but in friendship. Get the wet wipes out of your purse. We don't need wipes. Unexpectedly for Emily, the young man himself removed the drops of repentant dainty from her hand. The girl blushed and pulled her hand away. "Are you crazy? Look how he's staring at us. Are we doing something bad? And in general, I've long wanted to ask you, why are you so scared? It seems that your parents are not intellectuals, but some kind of monsters." The girl sighed heavily. "You know, you're right about something. No, my dad is a golden man. We have a complete understanding with him. But my mom, to be honest, I'm afraid of her. She's been pushing me around since I was a kid. I used to try to stay out of her way because she'd always find something to pick on. I developed so many complexes because of it. I still can't get rid of them. I can't envy you. Although I've had my share of mishaps in my family. But it's not that bad. My mom doesn't mind my shenanigans at all. It's just my father who's a real pain in the ass. But it's fair to say that I'm no picnic either. My parents have been through a lot because of me. That's why Dad's nagging is justified." Emily had finished her ice cream and was now looking at the people walking in the park with interest. "I haven't told anyone yet, but my most cherished dream is to get rid of my mom's tutelage as soon as possible. She is completely immersed in my affairs and controls everything, even my correspondence with friends. It's unbearable. Sometimes I think that Mom gets into my brain and reads my thoughts." Peter looked at the girl with sympathy. "It's really rough. I sympathize with you." The young people were silent for a while. Each was thinking about his own thoughts. Peter broke the long pause. "Emily, I'm sorry for the indiscreet question, but it's asking for it. Listen, do your ancestors know that we are dating you?" The girl jumped up and looked around apprehensively again. "No, they don't. If my mom finds out, she'll lock me up. So you've been hiding our relationship from them all this time?" "Yeah, I've been leaving the house on the pretense that I had to go to an extracurricular or macrame class. I didn't even realize you were into needlework. I told you it was just a diversion. So it's like a detective novel between you and me." "Why a detective novel?" "In the old days, girls from noble families used to sneak around with their dates." Emily did not immediately realize that she had carelessly revealed the reason for her misgivings. But Peter reacted sharply to her confession. "I see that your mother has implanted the theory of exclusivity in your brain." "Peter, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. I just said the wrong thing a little bit. But the guy's mood has finally soared. Emily, don't make excuses. It's not your fault. It's just that everything just fell into place. And I thought the old regime's principles didn't apply anymore. But it turns out they're very resilient. For the first time in my life, I have an unpleasant feeling. And I can't describe it yet." Emily wanted to make things right because she was afraid of losing her only friend. "I shouldn't have said anything to you." The young man objected. "No, you did the right thing. I need to know the truth of the situation. And then you are not just a girl I know." "Who, Emily? Don't you realize that I like you very much?" The girl did not answer. She hurriedly picked up her purse and headed for the exit of the park. Peter hurried after her. "You didn't answer me." She stopped and looked him in the eye. "Peter, you yourself know very well that you are also more than a friend to me. I have no other person in whom I can have complete trust, only you. And then there's Clara. But it's been 100 years since I've seen her, so I can't wait to meet her." They stepped out of the shadows of the park alley, and the midday heat pounced on them with a beastly anger. Emily grimaced. "The heat is unbearable. Let's meet tonight." "Okay, just tell me right now what you meant when you remembered your Clara." The girl was embarrassed she didn't want to tell you yet, but we're going back to law. Dad's been begging to go back to school, even offered the chancellor's position. You know, you can't refuse an offer like that. What about you? You're about to graduate." Emily sighed again. "No one takes my wishes into account. I'll have to go to that gymnasium again. Or my mom will find another elite school for me. I'm sick of her snobbery." Peter walked next to his girlfriend and kept quiet. The news that Emily was leaving didn't frighten him, but it didn't make him happy either. After a short thought, he knew what he would do next. "You and I will outsmart even your mom." Emily smiled. "I wonder how you're going to do it?" "Very simple. I had the idea of going to college here, but now I've decided to try my luck in Leh. It'll give me a chance to date you. Are you okay with my plan? Emily reached up on tiptoe and kissed Peter on the cheek. I'm fine with it. I'll be warmed by the thought of having you around. The girl's kiss put him back in a positive mood, and he optimistically said, We'll be able to call you back or keep in touch through social networks. Nowadays, it's easy to camouflage everything on the internet, so even the pros can't pry. Not to mention your mom. Peter, you don't know my mom very well, do you? You have no idea what she's capable of. On that May Day, the last thing a young man wanted to think about was the Molly Museum. After a frank conversation with his favorite girl, he was already working out a new plan for his future. Peter's parents calmly accepted the news that their son was going to LA. Ethan even approved of the decision. You're doing the right thing. You have to set the bar higher from the start. As the famous song says, only the brave conquer the seas. The boy grinned and corrected his father. Dad, I'm not attracted to the sea. I have other orientations. Of course, I am not aware of the latest changes, but I remember that not so long ago you dreamed of becoming a banker. By the way, a professor we know is going back to his university. He was called back. Now he will be in charge there. So you could use a useful acquaintance. No, that's out of the question. I don't need anyone's patronage. Besides, I want to go to a completely different school. Ethan sat down on a stool and batted his eyes at his son. So tell your father where you want to go. I want to be a geologist. I'll go to the University of Geodesy and Cartography. The senior of the club was clearly disappointed with his son's decision. But he also chose a profession. It's unpopular today. Wrong, father. A man's life depends largely on the wealth of the earth's bowels. Believe me, 10 years from now, the world will be fighting for natural resources. And our country has the richest deposits on many points. Ethan grimaced. I don't need my son lecturing me. I'm as good as you. I know what's at stake right now. I'm not going to argue with you. If you choose geology, go to school. Just make sure you don't regret any hasty decisions. Peter answered nothing to his father and went to the kitchen, where his mother was busy at the stove. Without turning around, the woman asked Peter, Your hasty decisions have to do with Emily's departure. You two are dating, aren't you? It was impossible to escape the loss of his mother's gaze, and the young man said, Mom, how do you know everything? Do not forget, son, where I work. With the mail, regularly report on your dates. I understand that the girl's parents don't know anything, don't know. Wendy shook her head. See for yourself, son. Emily, nice girl, but her mother. I don't think she'll be happy when she finds out about your friendship. And then there's that saying that you should chop your own tree. The boy's face turned darker than a cloud. Mom, you too. Let's not bring it up again. I will. And we can prevent Molly's shenanigans. Wendy gave her son a sad look. All right, Peter, I'll keep quiet. But you better cool your head and think seriously. Love is such a thing. First it burns bright, then suddenly it goes out, and there's nothing but ashes. I don't want you to stay on the ashes. The woman poured a full bowl of soup and put it in front of her son. She herself settled down across the table to rest for a while. Wendy gazed at her son, and at the same time thought sadly, and did not notice how her son had grown and matured. But a mother's heart can't be ordered. It strives to protect its child. How did my father and I miss my son's passion? She asked her husband this question late at night. He thought for a long time, but answered uncertainly. How can you predict ahead of time what will turn out to be youthful love? Maybe you're not serious with them. Emily will go to LA and forget. Immature love. The man was silent for a while, and Wendy sighed next to him. The atmosphere was conducive to frank conversation, and Ethan spoke aloud for the first time what had been bothering him lately. I'm worried about Peter. He's a sharp one, and if anything goes wrong, he can make such a mess of things. Ethan, you know that not all thoughts can be spoken aloud. Better think of the good things. Wendy, how can I think good thoughts when my son's fate is at stake? Nothing's happened yet, but if he continues to meet with this Emily, there will be trouble. Wait, Ethan, don't get excited. Maybe your son will meet another girl and forget Emily. There's nothing special about her. I don't understand why he's attracted to her. I'd like to know the same thing. And you're right. Maybe he'll meet another girl from a normal family. We don't need to be the ones with our pig snouts in the middle of things. Wendy poked her husband in the side. Go back to sleep, wise man. You may look like a pig. I don't consider myself one. And you should, darling. You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. The man wanted to add some more nice words, but he stopped halfway through. In a minute, he was already wheezing loudly. Peter couldn't sleep for a long time that night either. But the young man's thoughts were occupied with other things. He thought about his future, and his imagination gave him beautiful pictures of a happy life. And in every picture, Emily was next to him. It is known that youthful fantasies are rarely realized. In his dreams, Peter imagined the existence of LA differently. The first 2 years of his studies he did not live, but existed, because the institute had a very tight schedule. The rector himself gave lectures in their department, and almost every time at the end he said, "Remember, friends, not everyone will make it to the finals. Only the strongest and most responsible will be able to overcome the difficulties and receive a diploma from our university." The rector's speech was monotonous, and Peter shook himself to throw off his drowsiness. Zach humorously remarked, "You rush about like a horse in a stall. You know, I think we're all going to be hooting and hollering soon. If you listen to the rector, we should work like slaves to get this damn diploma." Comrade was surprised. "Have you given up already? I don't care about all these psychological treatments. Understand the calculation on weaklings to weed out the unnecessary contingent." And I immediately looked at the comrade with interest. "Thanks for the tip. I didn't realize. Turns out the chancellor's just trying to scare us. I'm telling you that we are being tested, or simply use psychological methods of influence. If you want, we can talk about it after class. There's plenty of convenient spots on campus to have a quiet chat. It's a deal." Later it turned out that Zach also lives in the same building, only on the 5th floor. When they met at the appointed time, the new friend, without embarrassment, offered Peter, "You've already got a girlfriend. If there's a gap, I'll help you." "Thanks, Zach, but don't bother. I already have a girlfriend. I just don't get a chance to see her much. And who's your lady of the heart? She's just a girl." I lied a little bit, though. Her father's a professor. He's the head of one of the LA universities now. That's Emily's name. Zach looked at Peter with an appraising gaze. "Yeah, that's a good one. Peter, I'm sorry, but you remind me of a naive character from a Mexican TV show. My mother loves soap operas and weeping over the plight of the unfortunate characters. I had to watch a few episodes of that soap when I was home with a fracture. So there was a guy like a shepherd in the movie fell in love with the daughter of the owner. And it didn't work out. Love. Pretty Daddy separated them. In short, the movie is a mess, but it's instructive. That's why I try to stay away from those chains. You know, I got hit on by this glamorous girl freshman year. But after 2 dates, I lost interest in her." The young people talked a little more about life and went to their rooms. Peter realized that California life was not what he had imagined it to be. They had met Emily only a few times in the past year and a half. However, the lack of personal communication was compensated for by almost daily phone conversations. But the young man reassured himself, everything will work out in time. We are destined to be together anyway." But the days went by, and this confidence began to melt away little by little. One day, Emily called him not in the evening as usual, but early in the morning. Peter was going to the institute and was very surprised by this early call. So he anxiously asked the girl Emily, "Did you have something wrong?" The bell of the girl's laughter rang. "I did. My parents decided to take a vacation. They took a 10-day trip. My mom says my dad needs to improve his health. She can't let him go alone." "That's great. So you and I can get together and go out." "Aha. I could even offer you a vacation at our cottage. You could meet my Clara." After that conversation, Peter wanted to do something out of the ordinary. He circled around the room in an incomprehensible dance. What surprised his companions? "Peter, there's nothing wrong with you. Should we call an ambulance?" "No, guys. There's nothing medicine can do for me. Make sure you don't infect us. They say rabies is airborne. Don't worry, folks, I don't have any dangerous infections. I just got a call from my favorite girl." One of my friends gave him a dirty look. I get 10 calls a day from girls, but I don't climb the walls. Peter did not explain his condition further and went to the institute. Zach was already waiting for him there. Hey, don't you know that we are launching a business project competition at the institute? No, it's the first time I've heard from you. I just found out today too. The winner will receive an impressive grant to realize their idea. You're the biggest hit in the department. Would you like to participate? Zach, you're holding my breath. I have to know the rules and requirements first. You can't just do something this big just like that. Peter, think about it and don't forget about me. Maybe I'll be a good companion. Okay, Zach, I'll definitely think about it, but not now. All the next days, the young man could not think of anything else because his thoughts were occupied with the forthcoming date. Peter liked Clara immediately. The woman reminded him of his mother. She spent the whole evening near them, offering various treats. Emily, Jan's daughter, baked from her favorite cupcakes, treating her friend. The girl did not hide that she was pleased with the care of the housekeeper. It was noticeable that she felt free in the country house. This conjecture she herself confirmed. Peter, more than anything else. I love coming here. Of course, I mean trips unaccompanied by my mother. The young man inquired, wouldn't your Clara pawn us off? It's hard for me to imagine what would happen if Molly found out about our secret trysts. She won't recognize Clara's fortress. She'd never rat me out because I'm like her own daughter. If it weren't for her, I would have died of green ennui long ago. They spent 2 wonderful days at the cottage and returned to the city on Sunday evening. Saying goodbye, Emily looked him straight in the eye. Peter, did you like my idea? You didn't have to ask. I think it's easy to guess from my satisfied face how impressed I was with our secret rendezvous. I will try to organize another meeting like this. The young man looked at his girlfriend in surprise. What about Mom's surveillance? I'll think of something. The girl kept her promise. Although meetings at the parents' dacha were not frequent, and that mostly in late fall or winter, they allowed the child's love to grow stronger. More than 2 years, young people secretly met in the country house. But they both realized that they could not go on like this for long. Peter decided to finish with secret assignments. He said this during the next meeting. Emily, we need to have a serious talk. The girl beautifully waved her eyes. I could listen to you forever. I'm serious and you're turning into a game. Emily made a funny grimace, but she couldn't hide her smile. Peter, don't mind me. I think I got a little bit of Mickey in my mouth. By the way, Clara has some urgent business today, so you and I will be all alone in this huge house. That's great. As soon as it gets dark, we'll go ghost hunting. Peter, you were just talking about having a serious conversation, and you're just making small talk. You're the one who confused me. I wanted to talk to you about serious things. The girl is quiet. I'm listening to you. Emily, you and I have been together for so many years, and I think it's time for us to take it to the next level. We're not going to hide from your mom forever. We're adults, and we have the right to decide our own destiny. Emily asked with bated breath, so you're saying we should get married? Well, yeah. Why drag it out any longer? No, I'm not rushing you. You think I'm going away soon for 2 months. The girl asked in a hushed voice. Where? Remember I told you about the business competition. I remember you were going to enter it. Yes. Zach and I had an unconventional idea, and for the sake of interest, we submitted our project. I had no idea that our work would win the grand prize. So what now? In short, we have to start implementing this plan. According to the terms of the contest, we got the money, but we can only spend it on the project. Zach and I got a sponsor who promised to help. Peter. And if he's fooling you, it's impossible. Everything is very strict there, and every penny will have to be accounted for. It's too bad you're leaving. It's only for 2 months, and then we'll have time to talk things over before you leave. In the meantime, take this from me. Peter took a velvet box out of his shirt pocket. He opened the lid, and from underneath it sparkled a small stone. I'm sorry it's not a diamond, but when my business goes up, I'll buy you the most expensive ring. Emily tried on the gift. Oh, that's lovely, Peter. I don't need time. I'm telling you now that I'm in. I'll wait for you. That night, the lovers spent without sleep. Something had happened between them that they had both waited for with excitement and fear. For the first time, they dreamed of the future together. And of course, those plans included children. Toward morning, when both were exhausted from the sleepless night, Emily asked, "Parrot, and if we have a baby, what will we name it? I haven't thought about that question yet. A boy could be named Makar, and Alex isn't a bad name for a boy either. What if it's a girl? Oh, I don't know any girl names. But wait, I had a friend in kindergarten who had such an unusual name. And Betty is a very kind girl. She always shared her toys with me, but she didn't stay with us long. Then her family moved away, and I still remember that adorable little girl." Peter turned around and kissed his beloved. "Are you anything like that girl? Betty, there's something airy and weighty about that name. If I'm not mistaken, it means golden or precious. So I'm not entirely wrong. For all the things we hold dear, we pay for in heavenly garments and highlight with our wings." A week later, they met again, but their rendezvous was brief. Peter immediately noticed that Emily was upset. "You don't look like yourself today." "I bet. You know, yesterday my parents announced that we're having guests over and my presence is mandatory. So I'm sorry, but our date will have to be postponed." "Emily, I'm leaving in 2 days, but you'll be back." "Of course I will. Where am I going to leave you?" He took the girl's hand and asked in surprise, "You're not wearing my gift." Emily blushed and took her eyes aside. "Don't be offended. You realize that if they see your parents, they will start asking questions." "Yeah, I realize that." They broke up, but there was still something between them. Peter thought bitterly she didn't even ask where I was going. But he didn't want to think about bad things. The hopes connected with the realization of the project helped to put him in a positive mood. All the way he and Zach discussed what prospects lay ahead of them. Molly thoughtfully twirled an inexpensive ring with a piano player on it. She had accidentally discovered it in her daughter's cosmetics cabinet when she was looking for hygienic lipsticks. Even in her youth, the woman suffered from winter and dry lips and solved the problem with a proven remedy. Emily was not a fan of jewelry. She wore only a thin chain with a cross and never saw this ring. I wonder where she got it. Never had any respect for cheap costume jewelry. Emily was taking a shower and decided to ask her daughter later when she came out of the bathroom. Suddenly, there was a stabbing sensation in her temple, and Molly rushed back to her daughter's laptop. The device was turned on, but was on sleep mode. Though the professor's wife was not well versed in such technology, on a user level, she could use it fairly tolerably well. The woman clicked a key, and immediately her daughter's Facebook page opened. Molly obviously could not believe her eyes, reading Emily's correspondence with some Peter. She strained her memory. Peter. Maybe a classmate. A door slammed at the other end of the apartment, followed by the sound of her daughter's footsteps. Molly shut down the laptop and put the ring back in her makeup. The girl came into the room and asked in bewilderment, "Mom, I was looking for your sanitary lipsticks. I don't think you're offended that I snuck into your room without permission." "No, Mom, it's okay." The girl asked for her laptop, but said nothing, and Molly was clearly in a hurry to leave the room. All evening, she had been thinking about the ring. Nor did the name soon give her any peace. Only at night, she remembered the cab driver's son, who had given them a kitten as a housewarming gift. This discovery was so unexpected that the woman jumped out of bed. Ben grudgingly asked her husband, "What did you pick up on?" "There's a reason. You're asleep, and your daughter may be in trouble. Honey, let's save the trouble for the morning. I've got lectures tomorrow morning. I've got to get some sleep. I've got to go to the cottage." Molly didn't know why she thought of going to the cottage. Probably her intuition told her that it was there that she should look for all the clues. Ben sat up in bed. "Molly, look at the clock. Can't you wait till morning? If you're so anxious to go to the cottage, I'll get my driver to take you tomorrow, and I'll go myself. As soon as it blooms, I'll go there. Can you tell me in a nutshell why it's so urgent?" "Ben, I don't know yet, but I have a bad feeling about it. I need to find out." It turns out that the man went to bed again, but he didn't have time to fall asleep because his wife asked him, "Ben, do you remember the son of that cab driver?" "Ethan, of course I remember. I think he goes to school here in Leh. I haven't met him, but he called me a long time ago, and we talked a little. The woman exhaled heavily. Okay, so he's here. It makes a lot of sense to me now. Like what? Please don't speak in riddles. I will, and I'll be blunt about you. Remember when you invited that grad student over? I think his name is Green. Of course I remember. I mean, it hasn't been more than 2 weeks. Nice guy. It's just too bad Emily didn't like him. Molly got excited. That's what I mean. He's a nice young man and educated. You said his parents teach too, not just the mother. The father's a prominent businessman. What's a good deal? Molly, throw out your stereotypes. You know you can't be nice to someone if you don't want to be nice to them, right? To be honest, I invited Miranda to come to our house on purpose. I was thinking about my daughter's future too, but I guess it's not time yet. You're wrong. It's just that our daughter has found someone else, and I don't even want to think about how far she's gotten. Ben sat up in bed again. And who's the other one? I'm not sure yet, but it seems to be your cab driver's son. If our acquaintances find out, we'll be laughed at. The professor's daughter contacted the cab driver's son and the shoe store clerk. The man was also amazed by this hunch, although he used to always look for his spouse when she started to speculate about unequal marriages. This time he remained silent. The couple spent about an hour in confusion. Then Ben began to hurriedly pack. I'll go with you. No, Ben, I'll take care of it. Did you hurry? The man cried out, Molly, what dream? Do you have any idea what thoughts are going through my head? I do very well. I'm in complete shock myself. Imagine going for my lipstick and finding a ring. It's cheap, it's a little something. And then I went to her page, and that our daughter is getting married and everything is quiet. But that's okay, I'll get them out. Ben quietly asked Molly, maybe we shouldn't get involved. Emily is already 21 years old. Let her take charge of her own life, but not while I'm alive. I won't let her marry the cab driver's son. An hour or so later, Molly Vanna was already in the cottage. The housekeeper was surprised by the unexpected arrival of her mistress. Why didn't you warn me? I decided to surprise you. As you say, like not to wait. I don't know that word. What's the matter with you that you had to rush out here? At the crack of dawn. You're still a shearer. I thought the best of you, Clara. You've made such a fool of me. The housekeeper pulled her eyes out. I don't know what you're accusing me of. I've served you faithfully for so many years. Clara, don't get sentimental. There's no need for them now. Why don't you tell me how a couple of lovers were covered up here? Or was there no such thing? The housekeeper's face flushed, and she fidgeted nervously with her apron. The woman's demeanor proved without a word that Molly had hit the target. Tell me, Clara, tell it like it is. If you don't want to be out of a job, and the housekeeper, stammering, told how the master's daughter had met a nice young man at the dacha. She withheld only that in their last meeting she had left the two of them alone. After the interrogation, Molly cried, but her tears were more theatrical than sincere. Clara, I trusted you. You were making a good salary and you let my husband and me down like that. I hope you realize you can't stay in this house after what has happened. The housekeeper collapsed into a chair. But you promised you wouldn't fire me if I told you everything. The professor's wife smirked. You see how unpleasant it is to be deceived. Now you understand me, and I will wait until you get your act together. And please turn in all the keys. Can we expect anything from you? Clara did not have 10 minutes to pack her personal belongings. She lived in the village herself, so she only kept the work equipment she bought with her own money in the house. The housekeeper didn't even say goodbye to the mistress, but slammed the door loudly. Molly couldn't help herself, and she's acting all resentful. She doesn't want to fall on her knees and beg me to leave her alone. That's how she shows her temper. Although the housekeeper did spoil the mood a bit, Molly was pleased with the action she'd taken. Now she knew how to put her daughter against the wall. But for the second step, she needed professional help. A few days passed. One evening, Molly heard her daughter crying in her room. The woman knocked gently. Emily, may I come in? Yes, Mom, come in. The girl carefully turned her face away, but the mother realized that she wanted to hide her tears from her. She sat down next to her daughter and began to caress her back. What's the trouble you're in? Emily tried to hold back her sobs, but she could not. Tears prevented her from speaking. So she turned the laptop on. Read to Mom. I believed him. I almost gave up on my parents. He did. The girl had her face buried in the pillow, so she didn't notice the triumphant smile on her mother's face. She read a short message addressed to her daughter. Emily, I'm sorry, but on the expedition I met a girl without whom now I can't live and breathe. Let only, which I gave you, you will remember our love. Made by surprise. Molly asked us daughter, and who is this scoundrel? Who dared to hurt you? The sobbing didn't stop. It's Peter. Remember, this is the boy who brought to our housewarming party. The cab driver's son. Of course I remember him, but I didn't even know you two were dating. And how far did your relationship go? The sobbing stopped. Very far. Mom, I'm having a baby. And I don't know what I'm gonna do now. Molly V became numb with horror. It became difficult for her to breathe, and she rushed into the kitchen, and there volleyed a whole glass of water. In her head was spinning the thought, what have I done? But an inner voice immediately calmed her down. But you knew your daughter's relationship with this guy had gone this far. If the gestational age is short, and from Clara's story and Emily's own it can be fixed. She went back into the room and began to reassure her daughter. It'll work out. Daughter, you're not alone in this world. You have a mommy and a daddy. You have to get rid of the baby. The girl jumped up. Her look frightened her mother. Don't you dare say those words to me. Mom, I would never dare to do such a thing. All right, just don't get upset. Everything can be arranged without unnecessary sacrifices. Emily looked her mother straight in the eye. Do you want me to marry Miranda? All right, I'll do it. So that my daughter can get her health back a little. Molly sent her on a vacation to the sea. The girl went to the resort with her future husband. At that time, Peter had just returned from an expedition. When Molly called him, Peter didn't immediately realize that he was talking to Emily's mother. The woman was crying and begging him to come over. As soon as he crossed the threshold of the apartment, a foul odor of incense and herbs hit his nose. Molly was in mourning, and Peter was frightened, then was dead. The woman pressed a handkerchief to her mouth. No, our Emily is gone. Our daughter, our only daughter. I don't know how we're going to go on living. Peter's eyes swam in circles, and he slumped against the wall. When it happened, because we corresponded with her, and a few weeks ago she disappeared, stopped answering me. Molly led her guest into a large room and pointed to a beautiful vase with gold lettering. That's all that's left of our girl. We couldn't even give her a proper burial. This asshole hit her and then ran over her lord. How can we survive this grief? The woman began to sob, wringing her hands. Peter was presented with this news like a slab of stone. He didn't know how to be. The girl's mother held out a ring to him. Here's your present. May you keep this ring in memory of my daughter. Peter had not yet realized the depth of his grief. He wanted to ask the woman more about the accident. But Molly visibly rolled her eyes and clutched at her heart. Please leave me alone. I can't talk anymore. I feel very bad. The young man was confused. He quietly closed the door behind him and went to his friend Zach. Zach met him surprised and didn't understand something. From the look on your face, your Emily was not very happy about your success. Peter collapsed into a chair and asked for something stronger to drink. Zach sat down in the chair himself. Peter had always been a staunch opponent of drinking. He never tired of repeating to everyone that a clever man could not want to make himself stupid, even temporarily. He said it was just wasted time, during which he could do a lot of interesting things. I believed him. I almost gave up on my parents. He did. The girl had her face buried in the pillow, so she didn't notice the triumphant smile on her mother's face. She read a short message addressed to her daughter. Emily, I'm sorry, but on the expedition I met a girl without whom now I can't live and breathe. Let only, which I gave you, you will remember our love. Made by surprise. Molly asked us daughter, and who is this scoundrel? Who dared to hurt you? The sobbing didn't stop. It's Peter. Remember, this is the boy who brought to our housewarming party. The cab driver's son. Of course I remember him, but I didn't even know you two were dating. And how far did your relationship go? The sobbing stopped. Very far. "Mom, I'm having a baby, and I don't know what I'm going to do now." Molly V became numb with horror. It became difficult for her to breathe, and she rushed into the kitchen, and there volleyed a whole glass of water. In her head was spinning the thought, "What have I done?" But an inner voice immediately calmed her down. "But you knew your daughter's relationship with this guy had gone this far. If the gestational age is short, and from Clara's story and Emily's own, it can be fixed." She went back into the room and began to reassure her daughter. "It'll work out. Daughter, you're not alone in this world. You have a mommy and a daddy. You'd have to get rid of the baby." The girl jumped up. Her look frightened her mother. "Don't you dare say those words to me." "Mom, I would never dare to do such a thing." "All right, just don't get upset. Everything can be arranged without unnecessary sacrifices." Emily looked her mother straight in the eye. "You want me to marry Miranda? All right, I'll do it. So that my daughter can get her health back a little." Molly sent her on a vacation to the sea. The girl went to the resort with her future husband. At that time, Peter had just returned from an expedition. When Molly called him, Peter didn't immediately realize that he was talking to Emily's mother. The woman was crying and begging him to come over. As soon as he crossed the threshold of the apartment, a foul odor of incense and herbs hit his nose. Molly was in mourning and Peter was frightened. Ben was dead. The woman pressed a handkerchief to her mouth. "No, our Emily is gone. Our daughter, our only daughter. I don't know how we're going to go on living." Peter's eyes swam in circles and he slumped against the wall. "When it happened, because we corresponded with her, and a few weeks ago she disappeared, stopped answering me." Molly led her guest into a large room and pointed to a beautiful vase with gold lettering. "That's all that's left of our girl. We couldn't even give her a proper burial. This asshole hit her and then ran over her lord. How can we survive this grief?" The woman began to sob, wringing her hands. Peter was presented with this news like a slab of stone. He didn't know how to be. The girl's mother held out a ring to him. "Here's your present. May you keep this ring in memory of my daughter." Peter had not yet realized the depth of his grief. He wanted to ask the woman more about the accident. But Molly visibly rolled her eyes and clutched at her heart. "Please leave me alone. I can't talk anymore. I feel very bad." The young man was confused. He quietly closed the door behind him and went to his friend Zach. Zach met him surprised and didn't understand something. "From the look on your face, your Emily was not very happy about your success." Peter collapsed into a chair and asked for something stronger to drink. Zach sat down in the chair himself. Peter had always been a staunch opponent of drinking. He never tired of repeating to everyone that a clever man could not want to make himself stupid, even temporarily. He said it was just wasted time, during which he could do a lot of interesting things. And here's Peter asking for a drink. "Yeah, there's one somewhere now." Zach put half of the bottle on the table. Peter himself took a tea mug, poured almost half of it, and covered his eyes. They had had a very productive 2 months, and their project had not just been a success. The sponsor who was paying for the project as part of the university's aid was seriously interested. He spent the last 2 weeks with them. And by the time the guys had to leave, he said, "You know, I've seen a lot of young people, yes, early ones. But what you've come up with now, it's like a game. The opposite of what you're doing. You're not doing everything the way it's supposed to be done. It's the opposite of what it's supposed to be done. And the result is amazing. I've heard of this kind of business, but to observe this, I have a suggestion for you." This businessman proposed to develop further, but no longer within the framework of the competition, but as an independent business. "I am ready to invest in the development, and well invested for some interest, which then I will receive. In principle, I have enough money of my own. My own business works well, but it will not only be profitable, but also quite interesting." Peter immediately asked, "What will happen if at some point the business goes bust?" The businessman grinned, "You are good. You need to talk business right away. Nothing will happen. We will sell everything we have and go our separate ways. In principle, the amount of money lost won't be that much for me. But if we're successful, we might make a nice profit, but we are still learning." Zach looked at his friend questioningly. He knew perfectly well that it was up to Peter to decide. Zach was only an assistant. For about 10 minutes, Peter thought it over, weighed it up, turned to Anthony. Everything will be formalized. We'll draw up the contract. The man smiled again. Of course. What's more, we can work out the contract together and then show it to our lawyers. We agree. What about the studies? Peter turned to Zach. We'll transfer everything to correspondence courses. In principle, they only came back to settle all the formalities, to inform their parents and Emily. Peter wanted her to go away with him. He dreamed of it as he had never dreamed of anything. And he was prepared to face the resistance of his parents. There would be so many things to deal with. But he was ready. But he wasn't ready for this. He just didn't expect this. Zach's up. Peter, you're scary to look at. What happened? She turned you down even though you've only been gone half an hour. Peter put the ring on the table, poured himself another. That's the ring you gave her. She turned you down. Peter smiled wryly. You might as well say she's dead. What? Zach fell back in his chair. She was hit by a car. I don't want to talk about it anymore. Peter did. But exactly to fall on his bed 3 minutes later, Anthony smiled contentedly. Somehow it seems to me that you and I have great things ahead of us, not just signed documents. Peter became the head of the firm. Zach became his deputy, and Anthony became the founder, but temporarily. It was a good fit. The guys were smart. And the experienced businessman had invested the minimum of what he could. Peter was going to work so that he would forget everything that had happened. It's been 5 years. Peter, is your mom calling? Yes, Julia, could you put her through, please? Did he pick up his mom or hello? Hello, Peter. I hope you haven't changed anything, or the guests are coming. No, Mom, nothing's changed. We're gonna celebrate your and Dad's 30th anniversary with a full house. Oh, Peter, I'm so worried. We've never been to a restaurant before. Should we start in our old age? We could just stay home and do the usual. Oh, no, Mom. I don't want you to stand at the stove for 24 hours. And then pecking your nose at the table. Wendy laughed. That's okay. So ever since you told me to quit my job from idleness, I've been afraid. And you know, I miss my shoes and boots so much sometimes. You talk to people, you give advice. You see that they like you, don't you? You're glad you did. Now I dust myself off and watch my TV series. Daddy walks around in the garage, disassembles his swallow, assembles it, disassembles it, assembles it. He's sad too. Don't tell me I knocked him out, but no, he'll go. And so he stays for a couple hours and comes back happy. Oh, I really wanted you to have a vacation. Peter's upset. 3 years ago, he talked his parents out of working, said he'd provide for them himself from now on. First thing he did was buy them another apartment. According to his earnings, the apartment in their town turned out to be a penny. Then the garage to my father wanted to buy him a new car, but my father resisted. Why do I need a new car? To blow dust off it, or take my mother to the market. She doesn't ride with me. At least tell me to go for a walk with people, to socialize. I'll always find something to fix on my pet. At least I'll have some fun. They did not want to offend their son, and did not tell him that without work, they just do not know how to live. Where to hurry, what to do. Ethan was wary of his son's rise. There were no rich men in their family. He even voiced his concerns to his son. On one of his rare visits, Peter, tell me, what are the odds that you'll go bankrupt at some point? I'm watching the news now and then. Banks go bankrupt, and you give me and my mom such gifts. An apartment is not like buying a loaf of bread, you know. Peter smiled cheerfully. Dad, don't worry. The probability is 0. Ethan was overreacting. But why? There's business sharks who've been in business for years. And then one day, boom, that's it. That's because they've been in business for years. They used to work the way they learned to work. This is a different time. First of all, you have to think. Secondly, you have to think in a way that no one else does. Thirdly, the direction of my business is something that not everyone can understand. All anyone sees is the result. Ethan again. Didn't realize he had such a smart son. One day, Wendy was up against the wall. You tell me, just tell me honestly. Don't be afraid of anything because it's been so many years. You cheated on me when I was young. Wendy, no, I even fell on the couch, but not for long. Quickly ran to the kitchen, took a broom and let him already Yamaha chew. So many years we've lived together, you know, soul to soul. And you asked me such questions, and the guru turned around as best he could. He realized he'd asked a stupid question. He and Wendy fought and argued all the time, but they loved each other and married for love, not for any covenants. He had a hard time taking her collapsed broom from Wendy. You just can't figure out who Peter's so smart anymore. You're a fool, Ethan. Another father would be happy for his son. You're just looking for reasons. Since that day, Ethan never brought it up again. Peter hung up. So, is it time to keep his childhood promises? He's got a week. He has to make it. Julia, come in here, please. Julia, his secretary, was immediately in the office. She stood at attention with her notebook at the ready. Peter always wondered how she never got tired of being so tense. Julia, can I ask you a question? The girl stooped and looked at him. Yes, of course. Tell me, do they teach you to stand like this in secretarial courses? The girl nodded and relaxed a little. No, of course not. It's just that I've been practicing ballet for 10 years, so I'm used to stretching with ballet. Eyebrows went up. Wow, I've never seen a real ballerina. You said you practiced and now you don't. Yeah, as soon as I could, I quit. I've hated it my whole life. When I saw the look in his eyes, my mother explained, she made me do it. She thought it was very prestigious. Peter smiled understandingly. The older he got, the more he met people his mother had forced him to do. The door opened. Zach walked in. Oh, Julia, you're here. The girl suddenly blushed sharply, and Peter looked at Zach with interest. So it looks like he doesn't know something. Zach took the girl's hand. Peter, we're friends. I think you'll understand. Anyway, Julia and I decided to get married and move away. You've taught me a lot, but I want to do it on my own. I hope you understand me. This company is yours. You're the only reason it exists. We both know that. So I have no claim to anything. Don't even think about it. I've raised some money. I think we have enough to start something of our own. Peter was at a loss. Zach wants to leave him. But then he looked at Julia's face. She was looking at his friend with such admiration, even awe. Emily had once looked at him the same way. He's tired on Zach. Can you surprise me? I won't keep you. Sure, I'll put it in your account so you'll have enough. I'm just asking you to wait a little while. My parents' wedding anniversary is in a week. I need to get away for a week. Sure, Peter, what are you talking about? And we've got some things we need to finish up. So go and don't even worry about a thing. But then, guys, I need a little more help. You know, I made a promise to my parents when I was a kid, but I'm advanced, I don't know. I'm not sure if they still remember it. But I decided to do what I promised. I don't have a lot of time, but if you'll help me. Zach smiled, pulled out a chair for Julia, and sat down. Come on, tell me. And then we'll decide whether we can or not. They sat for a long time. Julia made coffee several times, and by nightfall, when they were leaving, they were already in the middle of the night. Julia said thoughtfully, I wish that when my son grows up, he would treat me like that too. Zach laughed. You first, for this very son Julia immediately puffed up and gave birth. And Zach explained Peter with a laugh. Julia has 4 more sisters in her family, and her mom has 5 sisters. One hopes that the roots of men will prevail somewhere. But I'm setting myself up for a female kingdom. Peter's been on the road for over 5 hours. He was on his cell phone most of the time. In his hometown, the final preparations for the surprises were underway. He wasn't sure if everything was as secret as he wanted it to be, because small towns are big villages. But he hoped for the best. He turned into the courtyard in the evening and saw his mother and father at once. They were sitting on a bench near the children's gazebo. Most likely, they had been waiting for him for a long time. Peter pressed the klaxon scroll side frightened birds, and his father jumped up. Peter smiled. When I was a kid, I never thought he'd enjoy coming home so much. Wendy sat across from him and watched him reduce homemade dumplings. Son, and you're the only one who didn't bring any with you. Peter sighed. Lately, Mom had been bringing up this conversation more and more often. But what could he do if he still loved Emily? Yes, he realized she was gone. But Emily was always alive in his soul. Mom, what are my years? Everything will be. Wendy sighed. She understood everything. Of course she did. Knew how worried her son was. Knew he was working his ass off just to forget a little. So she changed the subject. Apparently, there's a new businessman in town. What makes you say that? You sound mysterious. In our town, it seems to me, that businessman would have been found out before he decided to come here. That's just it. Nobody knows anything. And he opened a new store, so beautiful. And the shoes are all expensive. But it hasn't opened yet. But probably soon. What's my point? Peter, no offense, but I'd like to work there. I can't stand sitting at home anymore. On your word of honor. There are all conditions and the work is not dusty. Mom, don't you have enough money? It's not about money. You see, I want to feel needed. When my grandchildren come, I'll babysit them. I can't watch these shows anymore. Wendy, but my dad was right there with me. Yeah, Peter, we're not really old. I'm about to be covered in dust, too. Yesterday, I saw new cars, cabs, all the same. Probably some new park they're opening. What am I gonna do with you guys? Well, we're celebrating tomorrow. We'll talk later. I'm going to sleep. Peter looked at his mother and didn't recognize his mother. You're honestly about 35 years old, no more. Wendy smiled embarrassedly. Say, what did the girls from the salon do? Father, look, it's nothing. Don't let them take you away. Ethan laughed, and for that he got a good kick in the ribs. Come on, let's go. Wendy looked at her watch. So early it seemed just right. We've got a few more places to stop. They stopped at a shoe store. There you go. This is the store. Well, let's go take a look, shall we? They got out of the car and walked towards the store. It was beautiful inside, quiet, with two young saleswomen displaying shoes in the windows. Wendy looked God, and the smell was native. How many years had I been selling these shoes? She smiled. Look, see, the girl puts the small size on the top shelf. You can't do that. Who has a small size, he also has a small height. Not everyone will ask the seller to help, to take off, and people go to another store. Mom, so to speak about it. What are you doing? I'm gonna tell you who the hell you are. Who you are the owner of this store. Here's all the paperwork. This is my gift to you. Remember I promised you and Daddy? Wendy stopped smiling. Son, are you kidding me? No, Mom. Here's the papers. Mom, just for a little while, because I have to give Dad the gift he promised me. And then we have a holiday. Ethan wrinkled his nose. He just couldn't understand how it was to take a whole store and give it to him, which was what the taxi company had promised him. But that was completely beyond the realm of fantasy. Half an hour later, they stopped outside a hangar. It was on the outskirts of a large but long abandoned one. Now it shone with renovations and new gates. Ethan nervously clenched his fingers. Dad, let's go. What's there to see now? Peter opened the gate, Ethan, and froze. Inside stood about 15 identical cars. In the far corner sewed two craftsmen, installing checkers on the cars. I think you can handle the staff yourself. Who would you know who is a good cab driver and who is not so good? The party was a little hectic. Peter couldn't get away from his parents because they were so excited. I berated myself. I should have prepared them somehow. He came back and immediately got homesick. Zach and Julia left. They promised to write, call, and even call him sometimes to visit. For some reason, they had decided to go to the end of the world. And now Peter felt the loneliness in full measure. He went outside after another workday, similar to all the others, and decided that he would walk. For over a year now, the main office had been in La. Every once in a while, Anthony would come to visit. He was the one who had helped with the building. Peter was walking without thinking where he was going. Suddenly, the very park he and Emily used to go to all the time stopped in front of him. They ate ice cream there, often getting ready for class. He squeezed his eyes shut, then stepped forward with determination. How long could he run from himself? The park changed. The trees became bigger bushes, changed shape. Apparently, the one that had been there before was no longer considered fashionable. He took a seat on a bench, sat for a while. There were almost no people. Autumn. In the distance, his mother was walking along the path. Next to her, a girl a little farther away, an elderly couple. These are all visitors to the park at this time. Peter stood up and slowly walked along the Russell, then climbing how much was experienced here. On your word of honor. There are all conditions and the work is not dusty. Mom, don't you have enough money? It's not about money. You see, I want to feel needed. When my grandchildren come, I'll babysit them. I can't watch these shows anymore. Wendy. But my dad was right there with me. Yeah, Peter, we're not really old. I'm about to be covered in dust, too. Yesterday, I saw new cars, cabs, all the same. Probably some new park they're opening. What am I gonna do with you guys? Well, we're celebrating tomorrow. We'll talk later. I'm going to sleep. Peter looked at his mother and didn't recognize his mother. You're honestly about 35 years old, no more. Wendy smiled embarrassedly. Say, what did the girls from the salon do? Father, look, it's nothing. Don't let them take you away. Ethan laughed, and for that he got a good kick in the ribs. Come on, let's go. Wendy looked at her watch. So early it seemed just right. We've got a few more places to stop. They stopped at a shoe store. There you go. This is the store. Well, let's go take a look, shall we? They got out of the car and walked towards the store. It was beautiful inside, quiet, with two young saleswomen displaying shoes in the windows. Wendy looked God, and the smell was native. How many years had I been selling these shoes? She smiled. Look, see, the girl puts the small size on the top shelf. You can't do that. Who has a small size, he also has a small height. Not everyone will ask the seller to help, to take off, and people go to another store. Mom, so to speak about it. What are you doing? I'm gonna tell you who the hell you are. Who you are the owner of this store. Here's all the paperwork. This is my gift to you. Remember I promised you and Daddy? Wendy stopped smiling. Son, are you kidding me? No, Mom. Here's the papers. Mom, just for a little while, because I have to give Dad the gift he promised me. And then we have a holiday. Ethan wrinkled his nose. He just couldn't understand how it was to take a whole store and give it to him, which was what the taxi company had promised him. But that was completely beyond the realm of fantasy. Half an hour later, they stopped outside a hangar. It was on the outskirts of a large but long abandoned one. Now it's shown with renovations and new gates. Ethan nervously clenched his fingers. Dad, let's go. What's there to see now? Peter opened the gate, Ethan, and froze. Inside stood about 15 identical cars. In the far corner sewed two craftsmen, installing checkers on the cars. I think you can handle the staff yourself. Who would you know who is a good cab driver and who is not so good? The party was a little hectic. Peter couldn't get away from his parents because they were so excited. I berated myself. I should have prepared them somehow. He came back and immediately got homesick. Zach and Julia left. They promised to write, call, and even call him sometimes to visit. For some reason, they had decided to go to the end of the world. And now Peter felt the loneliness in full measure. He went outside after another workday, similar to all the others, and decided that he would walk. For over a year now, the main office had been in La. Every once in a while, Anthony would come to visit. He was the one who had helped with the building. Peter was walking without thinking where he was going. Suddenly, the very park he and Emily used to go to all the time stopped in front of him. They ate ice cream there, often getting ready for class. He squeezed his eyes shut, then stepped forward with determination. How long could he run from himself? The park changed. The trees became bigger bushes, changed shape. Apparently, the one that had been there before was no longer considered fashionable. He took a seat on a bench, sat for a while. There were almost no people. Autumn. In the distance, his mother was walking along the path. Next to her, a girl a little farther away, an elderly couple. These are all visitors to the park at this time. Peter stood up and slowly walked along the Russell, then climbing how much was experienced here. Ethan had met many different people in his life and had learned to recognize the characters of passengers at a glance. After meeting the professor's family, he couldn't get rid of the unpleasant feeling of some understatement for a long time. After all, with her behavior and just a few phrases, Professor's wife wanted to show her superiority. If it had not been for her husband and the girl, who had not uttered a word during the whole journey, Ethan would have dropped them off after the first turn. But the head of the family was sympathetic. Bad luck for a man to have a wife. A snake like that. And why is it that good people are more often unlucky? After a short pause, the man answered himself, because good people have thinner armor. Ethan often dialogued with himself while working. This way of warming up helped to relieve fatigue, as well as speed up the passage of time. After dropping off the memorized passengers near the academic town, he headed to the train station again, because only there could make good money. They lived modestly, so the head of the household had to get around. From early morning until late evening, Wendy scolded her husband. "Ethan, you behave, you work until the grave." The man remarked philosophically, "Thank you, dear, for the glowing prediction, that we'll all be there. Some sooner, some later. But I would like to distance this moment better later, because we will not last long without you. So be kind and die a little bit of your fervor. You can't take all the money anyway, but you should strive for it." The woman with feeling rattled the table, undressed the board. "Here's a man with 2 ears. I give him a word, and he gives me 2. Ethan, when will you listen to what I tell you? I'm not a stranger to you. I'm your own wife. That's why I'm trying to bust my belly button, and you keep scolding me. I'm a man, and I have to be responsible for you. That's how my father brought me up, and I hope my son has also learned this cardinal rule." It's a vivid and sometimes dramatic scene. Happened in front of the eyes of 13-year-old Peter. The guy is used to such a squabble between parents and did not pay any attention to the next clarification of relations. Small apartment of ancient layout with 2 adjoining rooms did not allow the teenager to seclude himself in his corner. So he almost daily had to be present during the heated arguments between parents because of their housing constraints. Ethan and his wife were forced to discuss burning issues in the presence of their son. But there was some good in it. Peter listened to everything and took it all in. Only at the mention of his name did he mutter something unintelligible. In the same way the boy reacted to his father's wish, "Dad, I have already learned all your rules by heart, but every day you throw up something new, so as not to waste time. You could have the bylaws printed separately. That would make it a lot easier for me." The knife Wendy used to cut cabbage for soup. Hanging in the air, "You can't talk to Daddy like that." The teenager asked defiantly, "Why are you allowed to do everything?" "Well, I'm not. You guys fight amongst yourselves every day. It's so hard to hear, and then you try to teach me manners." Peter headed for the hallway, and Ethan followed by his son. "Stop, let's talk." The teenager froze in place, but a look of disdain froze on his spring face. But standing, the man's nerves began to heat up. "You're not being scientific. Who are you talking to? Puppy?" The situation was beginning to take on a tinge of conflict, and Wendy. She decided it was her turn to put out the fire. "You men take it easy, but you, Peter, you need to slow down. You're looking at your father. Have some respect, so he can respect me." Did the head of the household say it in his dictatorial voice? Respect has to be earned. Instead of keeping your mouth shut, you open your mouth. Peter abruptly turned around and flew out the door. Wendy rebuked her husband. The girl ran towards him. At first, Peter did not realize what had happened. Then he saw a balloon, which the wind blew quietly in his direction. The girl was very young, maybe a year old. 4, well, maybe 5. There was no way her little legs were up to the task. The balloon was coming towards him. He couldn't help the child. Peter grabbed the balloon by a long string and stopped, waiting for the child to run to him. But a couple of meters away from him, the girl tripped and fell. Peter even felt how painfully she collapsed and appeared. Mom was still far away, and the man rushed to the child, lifted her fuck, held out the balloon. "Don't cry, please hold it." Only now did he notice that the balloon had a name written on it. Betty palmed it right off the sweat. "Is your name Betty?" "Yes, I'm 5 years old today." Peter could feel his heart beating hard. It was exactly what he and Emily had wanted to name their daughter. And the baby looked up at him. So much like Emily. But how is that possible? Thank you. Betty, you're so careless. Peter was afraid to move. He slowly accelerated. Emily, you're dead. His Emily, stood in front of him and looked at him with a surprised look. The trip to the sea had not gone well. Miranda first tried, showed her signs of attention. But when he realized that he would not get a response, he switched to more compliant girls. One night, he came to her room under the influence. He tried to get what he really wanted, but he got such a rebuff that he had to go to the nurse's station. That's what he told her. I don't know what's wrong with you. If you don't like me at all, why did you come to the sea with me? Emily, who has already regretted it 1,000 times. I said you weren't informed. I'm pregnant and I need to marry someone. Miranda opened her mouth, so Emily had to cover it with the palm of her hand. Or it wouldn't close yet. Then she left the next day. When she returned, there was a very large and not very pleasant conversation with Molly's parents. She was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Ben kept quiet for a while longer. Finally, when his wife was drinking her second vial of valerian and Emily had run out of tears, he said, "That's it. That's enough. Honestly, I don't really understand what all the fuss is about. She doesn't want to marry him. She doesn't. But I'm not going to let you loom around here with a belly. You're going to live in the country house. Can you bring Clara back?" He saw Molly wanting to say something, but he slammed his fist on the table. "That's it," I said. "You ruin a child for your baronial stupidity. I won't have it." It was so unlike him that both women immediately shut up, and the next day Emily left for the country house. It must be said that she did it with great pleasure. Clara looked younger, and when Betty was born and Molly was born, she lost all her pride. She couldn't wait to have a little girl, and she kept telling Emily to come back to town. But Emily was adamant. She found a remote job and was making good money. She cried into her pillow at night, remembering Peter. Betty fell silent. Looking at the adults, the air literally tingled. "Peter, that's a good excuse. But don't you care if I'm dead or not? You met your love on the expedition." What love on what expedition? Emily, what's going on after all? You don't realize you can't do this, and I almost moved and mourned for you. He shouted. Betty cried. Emily seized her in her arms. "Hush, my girl. Uncle just doesn't know what he's saying." She turned to him. "Don't shout like a madman. Did you scare the child?" She shrugged her shoulders. "I don't know what you're talking about. You wrote to me yourself that you'd met the love of your life. I couldn't have written to you because it's not true. One day you just disappeared and stopped answering me." Peter spoke in a dead voice. "After you came back, your mom invited me over to your house. Sobbed. Showed me a picture of you in a black frame. Crying, telling me how some asshole had hit you with a car." Emily suddenly looked up at him with a look of horror in her eyes. "Mom, no, it can't be. A person can't be that cruel." She handed me this. Peter took out the very ring he wore on a chain around his neck. Emily touched it with her fingers. "I've been looking for it." They stood silent for a moment. Then Peter reached out, touched Emily's cheek. "You're real. I can't believe it." A tear crawled down his cheek, and Emily fell to his chest. He wrapped his arms around her and Betty and clutched her. "Oh God, please. Let this not be a dream." And Alex had long since fallen asleep in his arms. He and Emily walked around the park. For the second time they talked and talked and talked and talked and talked and talked. "Emily, do you realize that I won't let you go one more step away from me?" The woman smiled. "I won't let you go. We've missed you a lot. And I was even willing to forgive you for your betrayal. If you come back," you named your daughter the name we chose. And her father, Emily, looked at him in surprise and realized he was sincerely asking about her father. "So you think you loved me so much that you couldn't commit to anyone else? And me so that I went to someone else and made a baby?" Peter paused, frowning, but the river. Emily sighed. "I'm sorry, but you're an idiot." He stared at Emily for a while, then shifted his gaze to the sleeping girl and back to Emily. "You mean?" Finally, Betty is my daughter, my baby, my real live baby." Emily, it's a miracle. We're all going. Now we're going to my place, where Clara is worried. And in the morning we'll go wherever you say. In the morning, Emily hugged Clara. "Don't cry. As soon as you give your mom the house, call us and we'll come and get you Emily." "Emily, don't leave me. I can't do it without you." "Oh, come on. How could you think that? You raised me and you raised my turnip too." They were already approaching the car when a car came to the house. Molly and Ben got out of it. The woman saw Peter and froze. Emily put her hand on Peter's shoulder. She could see the jaundices in his cheekbones popping. Peter turned to Emily. "I'll be in the car waiting." Emily nodded briefly and headed toward her parents. Ben looked sadly at his daughter. He was well aware that they had now lost their only child. "Emily, I realize that there is no forgiveness for us, but you won't hide your granddaughter from us." Emily looked at her mother in silence. Then she asked Mama, "Is position in society so much more important than the happiness of her child?" The woman cried, "You'll understand me. When your daughter grows up, you'll understand me." "No, Mom, I won't understand. What's most important to me is that the child be happy. You've seen how bad I feel, and in all this time, you still haven't told me. Peter, do you know what it can do to a man when he's told his loved one is dead?" "Not for me, Mom. You did all this for you." Molly wanted to say something else, but Emily took her daughter's hand and they went to the car. Peter jumped out, helped her into the car. The car slowly pulled away. Emily didn't even look at her parents. Ben sighed some more. "What's up? Here we are standing here with you blue-blooded princes no one needs, and no one else in his old age no one will give a glass of water. No one and grandfather will not call. So what? How are you, Molly? Do you feel happy? I don't. Get in the car. We're going to the family crypt. We'll live out our lives." He got in and slammed the door loudly. Molly stood looking in the direction where the car that had taken away her daughter, her granddaughter, and the whole meaning of her life had gone.